Hello, today I want to talk about how to treat stress, anxiety, insomnia with herbal sedative preparations. Unfortunately, in recent years, we practically live in a constant state of stress. And stress, as is known, is one of the first and main causes of anxiety and insomnia. In fact, 90% of acute insomnia is caused by plain stress. Naturally, a person wants to fight this, and most often he just goes to the pharmacy and asks for something for stress and insomnia. And usually the first line is herbal preparations with a sedative effect. I wanted to talk today about one of such preparations, stressors, which I myself use in my clinical practice and see a sufficiently good effect from its application, which is made on the basis of the passion flower plant. A few words about passion flower. Passion flower contains about 20 different bioflavonoids, so-called special substances, which to a certain extent have a calming sedative effect. And in particular, the so-called luteolin 7-glucoside, which in placebo-controlled studies showed an extension of sleep, a decrease in wakefulness, an increase in deep stages of sleep. In general, quite a good effect. But what is the problem with using herbal preparations? The thing is, if a chemical preparation is synthesized, it's a controlled condition. It's the synthesis of the preparation, and it's clear what it contains. But when we talk about a herbal preparation, it's a plant that grew somewhere, depending on the conditions, what the light was like when it was harvested, what parts of this substance. And sometimes it's not entirely clear, if we're talking about a certain plant, whether the active substances of this plant are actually contained in the preparation in the right amount. In this sense, I always use preparations in my own clinical practice, specifically pharmaceutical preparations based on plant components, not biological additives. Because the preparations are controlled, and in stress, this special gluteolin, it is contained in a certain concentration of 4 whole 50%. These are special chemical studies that prove that this preparation contains the necessary amount of substances from passion flower, which have a sedative effect. And accordingly, this is confirmed by my clinical experience. When I use the preparation, I see a good anti-stress effect and an improvement in sleep quality. As for the mechanism of action, luteolin has an activating effect on adenosine receptors, so-called adenosine receptor agonist. And we know that adenosine is the so-called brake molecule when our energy level decreases, and adenosine in the brain signals the brain that it's time to rest and sleep. And if we stimulate these receptors, the brain also understands that it needs rest and sleep. And thus, a calming, sedative, and hypnotic effect is achieved when luteolin from passion flower acts on adenosine receptors. What can be said about herbal preparations? They do not have a pronounced direct post-stress effect. But this means that a person, if he dared and just drank a preparation before sleep, for example, as a tranquilizer, and fell asleep, plant-based preparations have a prophylactic anti-stress effect. If we eliminate the stress itself, then the sleep will be better afterwards. And this is a definite advantage of these preparations because they, unlike sleeping pills, do not cause physical dependence. That is, if we use a herbal remedy, particularly for stress, for a course of 3 to 4 weeks, we are not afraid that the person will develop physical dependence, and then there will be a withdrawal phenomenon, a rebound insomnia. Psychological dependence perhaps can be, but strictly speaking, this is dependence on the effect. If a person feels calmer and sleeps better, it's understandable that he thinks the drug is helping him and wants to continue using it one way or another. These are officially over-the-counter drugs. They are sold in pharmacies without a prescription accordingly, but this does not mean that you can't, or rather need in this situation, to read the instructions for use, read how to apply the drugs, what possible side effects are, and accordingly contraindications regarding the intake of herbal origin drugs. Sedative effect. In principle, the point is that these are not drugs after stressful action. That is, just taking them at night may not be effective enough. It is necessary to provide an anti-anxiety and anti-stress effect throughout the day, and stress is applied 1 tablet twice a day. Moreover, possibly slightly different variants. You can take it in the morning, and in the evening it is taken 30 minutes before meals, or an option when before lunch and before dinner, so that from the morning still a little more and more actively work, especially if a person notes pennies, let's say, an additional sedative effect during the day. This to some extent can interfere with a person's work in the first half of the day, but still need to take a course twice a day, and accordingly 3-4 weeks as a minimum for achieving a stable sedative sleep-inducing calming effect. As for contraindications caution, I want to say that herbal preparations are usually safer than some pharmaceutical sleeping pills, tranquilizers, antidepressants, and by the way, they are officially over-the-counter in connection with this. Next, what is important to underline, well, there are certain contraindications. Pregnant women, nursing mothers, people prone to thrombosis. Well, if you have such conditions, consult with your doctor again before or after any surgical operations. You also cannot use this medication. Side effects, they are usually rare, and in this sense, actually, as their shortcomings of our merits, that is, if the drug has a sedative effect, then a person may experience some confusion, fatigue, drowsiness. Well, here the question, if it is expressed strongly enough, then you can, for example, as I said, not take the drug before breakfast, but take it both at lunch and before dinner, or just even at night. In this sense, I want to say again that plant-based drugs do not cause physical dependence with a minimal amount of side effects, and in this sense, a person can go to the pharmacy, buy and take this drug. But I still try to make a reservation that you should consult with a doctor before taking the drug. And overall, I want to say that in my arsenal, in addition to some serious, large, heavy drugs, there are always plant-based drugs, especially stress ones, which I use in people with stress, with perhaps some non-catastrophic sleep disorders as the first line of treatment. That is, it is said there is no need to shoot sparrows with a cannon if there is an opportunity to apply some simpler sedative means and cope with stress and insomnia with their help, with a minimal risk of side effects and the risk of developing dependence is minimal, then this is the correct tactic, such a step-by-step treatment of stress and insomnia. Well, I wish you all a good sleep and, of course, cheerfulness, absence of stress, and a good mood.